back, Ethan and me. He just came back from a trip, and I'm going to be his host because he has valuable information from his trip. So that's Ethan Allen. He's a regular host of Likeable Science, and today we're going to call him Gunga Din.
All right.
That was Rudyard Kipling, wasn't it?
Exactly. Now, if my wife were here, she could quote the whole poem, too.
Well, Gunga Din means water boy, but it's more than that in Kipling's poem.
Right.
Okay, and he's also Bioman. We're going to talk a little about Bioman
I
today.
didn't realize how had all these nicknames here.
It's okay. You know, you have multiple personalities. Okay, so the primary discussion here is water, water and high tech everywhere. And we're going to talk to him about his trip and the water lessons he learned. But to start, I want to talk about the MIT technology newsletter.
Sure.
Which if you're good, they'll send it to you for free. Every day.
If you're bad, they won't.
And it is a wonderful newsletter. You can look it up online, the MIT Technology Newsletter. And the strange thing about it is that every day there's something revolutionary. Every day something fantastic. Not little, a lot, disruptive. That you didn't expect, and it's kind of an aha moment every day. We should cover it every day.
There we go.
So the subtitle for this show, again, the title is Water and High Tech Everywhere. The subtitle is Every Day Tech is a Revelation.
Yes, indeed.
So let's talk about it first. I know we really haven't studied it yet, but just to sort of deliver the news from the MIT newsletter, something about leukemia outside the country, in the UK.
I believe so.
And these researchers were using GMO on immune cells in the body, which weren't working very well in a young girl who had leukemia that was going to kill her.
Right.
And she went to these guys, and they had this kind of Sophie's choice about whether to do nothing and let her die, or to do something using their technology.
Right.
And suffer, problems with the regulatory agencies.
Right. It was a very radical idea, basically, of taking these T cells, one of the classes of immune system cells that had been engineered, and using these to treat her. And they hadn't tried this in any people before. They'd tried it in mice, and it looked like it worked okay in mice. But it was a very novel kind of.
Hadn't tried it with any person, no trials, nothing.
No, it had not been approved for use in human beings.
So they took a risk, but she was going to die anyway, and soon.
She had proven she was resistant to basically every treatment that they could use on her, and so she was on a sure path to
what did they say?
demise.
Leukemia cells were bubbling through her bloodstream. That was the expression in the article. Terrible. Anyway, that's leukemia, but it means that we can temper the efficacy of the immune system. This is what we're getting at here.
Right.
And the immune system is probably the most efficient way to deal with cancer.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you can amp up your immune system properly, it will know how to take care of almost anything that bugs you. To some extent, it can.
Bug is
an
interesting word to use.
But and the beautiful thing this illustrates, as we were just speaking of, is the fact that technologies and discoveries are happening at a fairly rapid rate now. So if you can postpone treatment for something that's not going to kill you off too quickly, in a year or 2 years or 3 years, there may be a much improved treatment for it.
That was a remarkable statement in the article. They said, no, it's not available for the public right now, but in a year or two, and I'm quoting, a year or two, it will be. Wow.
That would be remarkable to turn around treatment from that untried stage to approval for the general public in a year or two.
I don't think they're talking about in the U.S., though. We have our issues about doing things quickly.
Yeah.
We have layers of bureaucracy, But yes, I agree, and things are happening faster now. There are more scientists out there, young scientists who are dedicated, who understand the value of cancer research, and who can ramp up on it around the world. And part of that is the internet. I think they can. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Right. They can look at the latest art, so to speak, and science, and they can get a leg up on it.
Information can be shared so much more quickly now, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it can do stuff right at the edge of the envelope.
And there's also a big push in medicine and science in general to make sort of negative results of experiments more widely available more quickly. For a long time, basically, if you did an experiment, whether it was a clinical trial or whatever, and it didn't work, you basically wrote it off and didn't report it. You just sort of said,
That could be valuable to the next guy.
But yes.
Otherwise, he'll repeat the same experiment and waste his time.
Right, exactly. And so there's been this real push now trying to get the failed experiments into print or online, where people can look at them, see them, know what was done. And so again, that's I think upping the whole pace of discovery too.
Sharing, collaboration.
Right.
And we've had a show or two on this. There's a move at the Cancer Center, which is associated with JABSM in Kaka'ako, to stamp out the virus, the HIV virus. Stamp it out. I'm not talking about treatment of the symptoms or anything, or the bad things that flow out of having HIV, but stamping out the virus itself. And there are researchers working on this right now at the molecular level. We could actually make some progress right here, a mile away from where we're sitting.
You may recall I was talking with one of the researchers from Oceanet who studies viruses and all, and they're very tricky things to eliminate because they're not like normal cells, right? They're about half the time they're not living at all, and they can't really be treated as a living object. They won't respond.
They hide and they come back. That's the problem with HIV.
Well, yes, right. That's sort of the problem with many viruses is they can hide, and they can sort of hide in two different ways. They can hide as a independent viral particle where they're not really alive, but they're just a little protein coat surrounding some DNA. Or once they're in a cell, they can bury their genetic material in your cells, and then sort of be quiet. And they're hidden in your genes and stay with you for years.
They're small and they stay within the cell.
This is classic. It's the cold sore viruses that you get from a herpes infection as a young child, and may stay quiet for 20 years, and then you get stressed out and they pop and become a little bit active again.
Yeah, we have to understand them to beat them.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
We have to know their moves, their conduct, their movies, so to speak.
Right.
The other thing that I learned recently in some discussion with one of our scientists was that, the notion of mutation, we used to think of, I used to think of mutation as a Mendelian kind of thing. It happened accidentally, only once in a while, and then there would be the survival of the fittest and all that. But when you're down at the molecular level, mutations are regular business. These viruses are always mutating. It's not like they're waiting for some commandment from heaven or something. They're just always mutating, which means, and most of the mutations are not successful, but a certain percentage are successful. For them, not for us, for them. And so, what you have is a constant threat, an evolving threat. What we solve today, they'll be back with something else tomorrow.
Well, again, remember though, thinking, I don't know if it's true with viruses per se, but bacteria, you think of as bacteria as bad things, but something like 97% of them are either harmless and or vital to us.
Yeah.
And only a very small percentage are really harmful to us. So.
Yeah. We had a show on that on Monday. Two bacteriologists essentially talking about friendly bacteria that animals and mammals need in order to survive. That we are.
Oh, we're filled with them. Covered
goes back to when we lived in the sea, and the seawater, went through our systems and everything, and all of this cilia in the systems, they all have bacteria, and we need them. They're our friends. Right. Bacteria. That was the title of the show. Bacteria can be your best friend.
Oh, absolutely.
They also mutate though.
Right.
and in in the news today, I think it was also in the MIT Tech Journal, Tech newsletter. The thing about what do you call it? Brazil. And that virus,
Zika virus?
Zika virus,
right.
And it's all over South America. HPR, for example, has been doing, coverage of one country after another every day. I never heard any news media, focus so much on South America. But there's a lot happening, and aside from the political, which is, uncomfortable, but the Zika thing, and now they got to obliterate the mosquito. Now mosquitoes, you obliterate them and they kind of come back because they go from continent to continent. They find a way to get back. But at least in the moment, you've got to really obliterate the kind of mosquito that carries Zika. The only way to deal with it, because they don't know what to do at the molecular level.
Right.
So in Australia, there are researchers there who found that they could make a GMO bacteria, and this bacteria would get into the mosquito, and it'd have a different effect on male and female.
Mm-hmm.
On the female, it made them unable to procreate.
Mm-hmm.
On the male, it made them sterile.
Mm-hmm.
This has the effect of knocking off the mosquito population
Very quickly.
very quickly, because
Right.
it has a short life cycle.
Right.
So that's the way it's expensive. It's GMO, and for that reason, you know, there's issues in distributing it and deploying it around, say, a
Right.
country. But it's the only thing that works. You know, the old DDT thing, spraying it with
Right.
poison, that doesn't really work.
Well,
You know,
it
and
works to some extent,
To
but
some
yeah,
extent, but,
it's
you
slow
know,
and inefficient and
this
expensive.
is much more efficient.
Right, no, this whole idea of doing gene drivers that will spread genetically throughout the population and wipe it out, basically, is a very interesting thing. Very frightening, too, though, because then you're manipulating a whole species in a way that we could not do before, and potentially you could literally wipe out a species of mosquitoes, which may
And
not
you
sound
don't
like
know the effect of it.
Right, you don't know the effect of it. And once that's done,
Well, most
you
people say,
can't
I
go
hate
back.
mosquitoes.
Right.
If they go away, it's all right. But you don't know
No.
the implication.
Right, exactly. Mosquitoes are part of a very complex ecosystem web. And yes, well, that little thread may not seem very important or very nice. And once you pull it out, you don't know quite how things are going to unravel from there. And
The comforting thought is that they'll always come back anyway. The buggers will always come back.
well, there are a lot of kinds of mosquitoes, and right, I agree, it's sort of hard to envision that knocking out Aedes aegypti particularly is going to have that bad an effect on the world as a whole. But yes.
All this work on genetic modification is scary in the sense of, you know, if it falls into the wrong hands and people want to do dastardly things with it, and they decide to use it on human beings, it could have the same effect. It could make for sterility or inability
Right.
to procreate, whatever it is. And at the end of the day, you know, you could wipe out the people who are subject to that GMO.
But I mean, we've done sort of the same thing in the past. You know, when gunpowder first came into use against populations who had no gunpowder-based weapons, I mean, they were outclassed entirely, and it literally blew them away, right? The classic stories, of course, of taking the blankets from the smallpox sanitariums and purposely dumping them out where Native Americans would pick them up and think they had found something useful and valuable, and instead basically was just spreading smallpox across a population that was completely vulnerable to it.
Yeah, it's right.
Yeah, devastating.
It's bioterrorism in the early form of it.
Right, yeah.
And certainly that can happen now. I mean, in laboratories around the world, there are bioterrorism substances.
Right.
And,
That's why they have these biosafety lab, different levels for different risks of things from 1, 2, 3, and 4. You know?
But this, you know, this wouldn't kill anybody walking. This would just make it impossible for the race, you know, to succeed. I mean, if Hitler had this, my goodness gracious, right? He would say, well, you guys get to live, and and procreate, you know, have generations after you, and you guys don't. We wipe you out.
Right.
He won't even feel it.
Right.
We wipe you out.
No.
This, I mean, gee, this is the scariest possible aspect of that. Don't worry about crops and pesticides. No, this is what you should worry about. Okay, we take a break. Whoa, heavy Judy. That's Ethan Allen, scientist. He's the host of Likeable Science, and he's going to talk about water right after this break, about his trip from which he has just now returned yesterday. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on Think Tech Hawaii every Friday at 3 p.m. We address issues of importance for those of us who live here on the most isolated landmass on the planet. Please come join me Fridays at 3 p.m. Mahalo.
Hello, I'm Stephen Katz, and I'm the host of Shrink Wrap, which comes to you live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. on Think Tech hawaii.com, and then it's repeated again whenever you want if you go to the website. On our show, we will be talking to all different kinds of therapists, psychologists, psychoanalysts, psychiatrists, people who talk about the mind, the brain, and about different ways to find happiness. I myself am a marriage and family therapist in practice here in Hawaii, and I hope you will join us because I've got a lot to learn, you've got a lot to learn, and it's a great ride. Thanks a lot. See you soon.
Bingo, Friday, you know. If I didn't express it, it's just wonderful to talk with other hosts here and share the experience. And we do this thing called Think Tech tutorials every Thursday at 5 o'clock. It's so much fun. It was great last evening. We had a wonderful time. Carol Montlee was one of them. And let's see, who was the other one? It's coming back to me. Who was it, Zuri? Oh, Carl Campagna, the host of Education. And it was great, because so much creativity, you know, when you put it together, it's like nuclear.
Well, it's just what we were just talking about, this ability to share insights and information. As we do more of that, we can get better progress.
Yeah, yeah, and you learn in the process. You learn what you should have thought of maybe before, but somebody helps. It foments your thinking.
Exactly.
Okay, so you came back.
And this is...
I'm happy about that. You came back in time for this show. I'm happy about that. We like to fill all the pukas in the broadcast schedule. So, where did you go anyway, Ethan?
So this was a conference in Washington, D.C. of a program or a division at National Science Foundation, and they fund a set of programs under the acronym of AISL, Advancing Informal Science Learning. And this is the idea that there's a lot of science learning that happens outside of school and outside of college and outside of the formal world of research, that people are really learning science all the time. Everyone from the youngest kids to the oldest adults. A lot of the venues you think of pretty sort of normal, zoos, aquaria, science centers, museums, but really it's spread out in recent years where the AISL group supports all kinds of different work in different kinds of communities. So my own Water for Life project, which I work with communities out in Palau, Chuuk and Yap states in Micronesia and the Marshall Islands, just sort of communities of the people there, and that's supported by this AISL group, which is why I was invited as a principal investigator in that program, was invited back to share my work, talk to other people who do their work.
That's an honor, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's a responsibility in this, when you get funded from them, you say that you have to write in your budget that you will go
Command
back.
performance.
Yeah, exactly. You know, they really do want you, because they want to know. They want to know how they've been spending their money. You know, what you've been doing with it, what kind of results you've been having, what kind of challenges you've been running into.
Yeah.
And
So, what about the dimensions of the conference? How many people? What was the scope of it?
so there were something like 140 posters presented at this conference. So roughly that many
poster?
people.
Tell the people what a poster is.
So these were literally just sort of actually old-fashioned way. It's a sort of a two-dimensional representation of your work, not just writing it up as a paper, but showing it in some pictures and some graphs and maybe a couple of flashy, snazzy
like
images.
the kids do in the science fair.
Yeah, exactly. It's an adult science fair,
Science is a fair. Isn't it?
And so, I had done mine with a number of pictures of some of the recent work that I'd gotten, pictures I'd just taken when I'd been out the week before out on my
Fresh
sites.
copy.
So, yeah, so right, slapping up as fast as I could, yeah.
So what did you report? I mean, what was your report? Make a report for us now. Summarize it.
So one of the great things that's happened in my work is we've got communities out there in these sites now who are paying attention to and monitoring their water systems better than they used to. So they are, for instance, in Majuro, the Marshall Islands, there are teams at each school now. All the public schools in Majuro have teams of teachers, parents, and students who are jointly responsible for watching after their rainwater catchment systems, so that they look at the roofs of the buildings and be sure the roofs are staying clean. They periodically clean the gutters. They have these things called first flush diverters, which catch the worst of the dirt that comes off the first. They empty these after each rainfall. They watch the level of the water in their catchment tanks. At least every month or every couple of weeks, they're going and taking samples of the water and testing it to see if this water is still good or if it's gotten contaminated, and they're reporting that back to the Environmental Protection
I cannot
Agency.
imagine that happening here.
Oh.
So there must be a difference in the way the public views the issue of water.
Well, yes. So on Majuro, the public water system that is connected to everyone's pipes and things is pressurized for about 12 hours a week.
That means you get water 12 hours a week.
Yeah, and since it's unpressurized so much of the time, and since so many people have tapped into it illegally, that water is not necessarily clean, and they don't recommend drinking it at
So
all.
it sort of backfills.
Right, backfills. So even the water they treat to make it sort of clean, it's coming through pipes that aren't themselves very clean, so you can't really rely on it. So yeah, it's a very different world out there in terms of water availability.
So people are scared.
Well, no, they're used to it. We're just incredibly spoiled in this country.
Complacent.
I mean, literally, because you walk up to any tap anywhere in this country, you turn it on, and you don't give a second thought to it.
Mostly.
Yeah,
Except in Flint.
well, yes, and Flint, unfortunately.
Congress went to Flint. I thought about you because we did a show on
That's
Flint, right? What's the
there's-
name? Used to be the Speaker of the House woman. Anyway, they all lumbered off to Flint so Congress could, I don't know,
Excellent,
check
excellent.
out what was going on.
Good.
in
No,
Flint.
there needs to be more attention to that. And yeah, that's just the sort of the tip of the iceberg, because there are a lot of other sites that actually have worse blood levels than Flint. So that's not a reassuring thing to see. But
No, but I mean, this is coming to an end little by little. I'm sure you could follow, the number of stories about water problems in this country with a sort of a scatter chart, and you'd see it going up and up and up like that. Problem here, problem there.
well, the whole view of water is changing. While I was in Yap, I was talking with a couple of folks from England who pointed out that they were, in their town in England, they had just started metering the water a couple of years ago. And up to that point, no one had metered the water. The water was readily available. It was just sort of considered
took what you wanted.
a basic right, and everyone just took what they wanted. Nobody cared about how much you took.
Those days are over.
Right. Now we're coming to realize, water is a valuable commodity, and so.
I remember how this is early in the life of ThinkTech, I discovered Lake Baikal.
Right. Sure.
It's in
sure.
Russia.
It has
in
one
southern
fifth
Siberia.
of the liquid fresh water on Earth is in that one lake.
Right.
1/5 of all the liquid fresh water on this
Huge
planet.
and beautiful.
It's very deep.
Very
Yes.
deep. It's amazing. It's like one of the 7 wonders.
Yep. Has its own seals that are found nowhere else in the world.
Seals, yeah. Anyway, I mean, it's very remote. However, in the 21st century, there's factories, there's industry, there's settlements, and cities alongside. Now, Lake Baikal, the last great stronghold for clear, clean water and unlimited supply, basically unlimited supply, is getting contaminated.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's awful.
Oh yeah, no, it's truly depressing, and I hope they can put a damper on that, because
Yeah. Anyway, I think we have a big water problem. And you mentioned this before, is that you really can't tolerate starving. It's not a good thing. Nobody's going to tolerate starving. They'll do desperate things, desperate times, desperate measures
Right.
to avoid starving. But
Yeah.
water comes first.
Oh yeah, starving will take you a month.
Yeah.
Water will take you a few days, and so yeah.
Yeah.
Can't run out of it.
Remember my first trip to China, I noticed that everybody on the street carried a little bottle of water with them. Everybody. When the marching bands marched around in the uniform, the military, everybody carried a bottle.
Huh.
When they wanted to play a song, they put the bottle of water down. Always with a bottle of water.
Really?
Yeah. And that's because, you couldn't get good water out of a tap.
Right.
You had to carry it with you.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
A lot of places in the world like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't cheap. It's going to be more expensive later.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Of course, this conference I was at dealt with a whole lot more than water. It was this whole huge
What
realm
else? What else?
of advancing informal science education. So all kinds of exhibits, films, new media broadcast. We could probably apply for some AISL funding for ThinkTech, as a matter of fact, Jay.
Yeah, like that. Well, you're definitely covering the subject.
One of the coolest things I saw was a great group who had sort of turned the whole field on itself. So they had have a science center Newport, Oregon, Hatfield Marine Science Center, a small science center, you know, touch tanks and the little exhibits of all sorts. And they've fitted the whole thing up now with cameras all around it, cameras within the exhibits looking back at the people, microphones all around it. A sign at the entrance sort of saying, by the way, when you enter this, you are going to be filmed, you're going to be videotaped. If you don't like that, turn around right now. Because basically, and they can, the whole thing has face recognition software, so they can trace your path through this exhibit, and the path of every person, every family group. They know how you're interacting. If you start pushing buttons on an exhibit, that's linked to you. So if you come back to it later on and start pushing other buttons, they can tell what you're doing differently each time. They can look at how different exhibits are used by men, by women, by children, by boys, by girls, by different ethnic groups if they want. You know, different times of the day. I mean, it's an incredible data set that they now can share out
In the
with
conference,
other
this is happening now.
Yeah, and these people are sharing this, and so other researchers who are interested in how people learn really can look at this and say, wow, here's this beautiful tool, and you can drop a prototype of an exhibit in there and watch how people interact with it. See it, do people make certain kinds of gestures as they're, you know,
Nobody
catching on to it?
objected? Nobody said, oh, that's privacy, you're violating my privacy?
Apparently, they said they heard a lot of people talk about that, but they basically sort of stuck, as I say, big signs up at the start of it, basically warning people as you walk into the space that you cannot
It's the
expect.
condition of their entry.
Yeah, exactly. And they've had virtually nobody turn around and walk out.
Yeah.
I suspect maybe a few people, if you're, you know, in the witness protection program or something, didn't ever wish to be seen. You know? Yeah.
Well, the implication is huge. It's a program called Person of Interest. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I haven't seen that one.
And it's a high-tech, you know, it's a high-tech action serial on cable. And I really like it because it's very tech. And they have this software, that's facial recognition software and all that. It plays a role in each episode. But clearly, we have cameras. You know, London has a huge number of cameras. New York has a lot of cameras. Most of the cities in the country. I think Hawaii is way behind on the cameras. We don't have that many cameras. And this recognition software, you know, goes with the cameras. So we're gonna be living in a world soon enough where, you know, everybody is being tracked on the cameras, because the cameras pick you up on one block and then they pick you up again on the next block. So even if there's no camera in the middle of the block, it knows where you are, it's tracking you.
Right.
And then when you talk about this, you know, once they identify you, then they're getting further data about you, about everything they could know about you, and they're remembering that. So it's big data for everybody in the place.
Right. They see you walk into a store, they see a transaction happen in the store through a different database, and if they can assume that's you, you know, then they're going to know about your buying habits, and you know, yeah, it's incredibly powerful as they start putting together these big multiple databases. You know?
Yeah. You didn't have any reservations about privacy. I wouldn't either.
I
get too excited about the technology to worry about privacy. I want to see them develop it. I guess, but just with you now, so what would you use that for? It's one thing to try to sell you something, but there's got to be a more constructive use of it.
Well, when these guys, and I was just talking to them about this, and I said, well, what happens if you put this instead into a classroom, right? And you watch how teachers are interacting and how kids are interacting, and you begin really to understand how classroom learning happens, not just learning in an informal environment, but there's a tremendous potential to teach teachers about what's effective teaching techniques, what kinds of things you're watching for in terms of the kids' attention, where are they watching, how are they interacting with one another. You can begin to, and apparently actually some groups in Europe are actually doing a good deal of this. They actually have these classrooms that are all set up as basically experimental classrooms to study learning. Relatively few of them in the US, but apparently a number in parts of Europe now. So, and then of course I thought, well, being a biologist, I thought you should put these same kind of systems in primate houses, right? So you can tell whether the zoo is really providing a good environment for the monkeys. Are these monkeys behaving properly as monkeys should? Are they grooming the proper amount of time? Are they socializing in the right kinds of ways? You know, you could do all this with the same kind of system, right? And again, have a baseline, be able to tell whether that zoo is giving them an adequate environment with the right kinds of stimulation and you know, the right opportunities.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a positive thing. Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the negative things.
Okay.
Ooh. That's Ethan Allen. He's a scientist. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Carl Campagna. I'm the host of Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. You can see our show every Wednesday at noon at 12 p.m. on thinktechhawaii.com, as well as visiting YouTube and finding the link for the show there. The show is also aired on OC16. We look forward to seeing you on the show. We have many wonderful guests, including Joan Husted, Corey Rosenlee, where we talk about the very important issues of education for our keiki. We look forward to seeing you there. Mahalo.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host the show called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. We go beyond outrage to find solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. I hope you will join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We broadcast live from thinktechhawaii.com. Aloha and bye-bye.
Ethan and me, we love to be here. We get together when we can. We explore stuff. We bat it back and forth. It's great fun. And we find out so much. We just take it from all sides. So, you know, we talked about Ethan's recent trip to the National Science Foundation
Right.
in Washington, talking about science for the masses, I guess, for education.
Right, informal learning.
And including Ethan's water project from the South Pacific. But you know, we always get distracted in these discussions, and now we're talking about this, and springs off that conference where they were tracking people like person of interest. They
Not
were
at the conference, but one of the groups presenting.
one of the
it
groups.
was talking.
They presented it.
Right.
Okay, and you know, so you identify a person, and
Right.
then you track that person,
Right.
and then more than that, you have everything loaded to, you know, tell you about what that person's doing. So every time the person does anything, you know, it sends it back to the mothership, and the mothership has got all this big data about that person's profile in terms of activities. And, you know, it's easy to extend that with all the cameras and, you know, all the cities to everywhere. And to, I know that you can experiment with it now, but it's not that far from experimentation to actually doing it.
No,
You know.
I mean, you don't even really need in some ways, you don't need the cameras or anything. You need access to the databases that already exist.
Right.
So actually you filled in for me some year or so ago on a show when I got ill and couldn't host it, with a guy named Alon Ben-Ari. I don't know if you remember. He had gotten interested in this issue of vets' suicides, since vets from Iraq and Afghanistan wars commit suicide at an appalling rate, and indeed more vets have died from suicide than from combat. And so he started putting together multiple databases and trying to find common patterns. And what he found was there were indeed common patterns in terms of numbers and types of visits with social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, you know, substance abuse counselors, DUIs, you know, by sort of pulling together a bunch of different databases, he found there were common patterns in the people who either committed suicide or attempted suicide. And what's more interesting, of course, he found there are people who are living who have not committed suicide or attempted to commit suicide who have these same patterns in their lives, in that database, in this sort of big meta-database, as it were, which are just these people. Of course, the military should be paying a lot of extra attention to them and sort of stopping by and shaking their hands and saying, "Hi, guy, how's it going?" Because these people, if they have those same sets of background incidences, are probably people who are likely to become suicidal. You know?
So you have predictive analysis.
Yeah, exactly.
You can
exactly.
predict when he's going to try suicide.
Well, yeah, or that he is
It's a
has a
little
higher
scary.
probability. Yeah,
And then you take action based on the prediction.
right. Yeah,
Even though it's only a percentage prediction.
right. It's just a correlative analysis, and it has no real causative aspect to it. But yeah,
There was a movie about this. No, where they predicted people who were real sensitive, intuitive, and they would predict. It wasn't so scientific, but they would predict the people who are going to, do crimes. And pre-crime, they would identify you, and then they would punish you before you did the crime, which was kind of interesting. But it flows out of the same kind of predictive analysis.
Right.
So you say that you have a good prediction that somebody's going to commit suicide. What about somebody going to commit robbery?
right.
What do you do if you know, as a predictive matter, that's 98.7% he's going to do robbery? What do you do?
So yeah, I mean, there's an interesting thing. If you took all the people who were imprisoned for and been convicted of robbery and began looking at all their life history that you could, their doctor visits, their, any social service agency that they've worked with or had contact with, anything, as we build these huge databases, all the run-ins with other run-ins with the law, anything like this, can you begin to extract patterns out of this? And once you can, then what if you see other people who are not currently in prison for robbery who have this same pattern?
Yeah. There was a conference at UH about a month ago. We covered it. We did an OC16 show on it. And essentially, it was the intersection of mathematics and computer science. I mean, high mathematics. And what's the rage? It's predictive analysis, and it's all the rage. I mean, that's what people are focusing on.
Right.
You get that data,
Right.
and then you find a pattern of conduct, and then you know what a person's going to do, or a stock market, or a business, or a group of people, a nation,
Or
what they're going to do. Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And the bigger, more complex the databases are, the harder and harder this predictive analysis is.
Yes. And we do have big databases, and they are shared.
Right.
I mean, one thing that came up while you were in the trip, and I'm sure it came across your desk, is that Apple is it's generating a fight with the FBI and the federal government. And I wrote a piece about it. I did my thing, and I support the FBI because I believe in government. I believe we need to have a government. We need to believe in the government. But when I went around and I asked people, I found that one of the elements of opinion on this is whether people trust the government. And I found that it was almost universal in the people that I talked to, that they didn't trust the government.
All right.
That they didn't believe the government would do the right thing, or the government would treat them right, or the government would not abuse information that it got through systems like the one we're talking about. So if that is true, I don't know if it is, but if I don't like it, but if that is true, and the government has all this footage, all this data, and the government has predictive analysis on what you're going to do, and the government, applies that to criminal activity or subversive activity or terrorist activity. You haven't done anything, but there's a chance you might.
Right.
What does the government do to stop you? I mean, it's coming. And is this constitutional to take governmental action against somebody who hasn't done anything, but you only predicted that he might do something?
I mean, yeah, it raises all kinds of interesting questions. Now, if all that does is generate sort of a small list of people so the government can pay attention to those handful of people rather than having to watch everybody in the room, as it were, to me that's great. It means the government should be able to operate more efficiently, right? This handful of people are the ones who are likely to cause trouble. Therefore, keep your eye on these people, watch what they're doing, and if they step out of line, even in a relatively small way early on, grab them, don't let them get away with it, slap them down and sort of say, hey, you stepped out of line, bingo, you're having to pay.
Kind of like profiling, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it is.
The ultimate profiling.
Right, but
we know what you're going to do.
Yeah, it's
you're a criminal already.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but that obviously you can't send somebody to jail for their bad thoughts.
Can't you? Can't you?
Well, you shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be. I mean, that's not constitutional, is it?
Right.
You have to be tried. You have the right to a jury trial by your peers and all that. But if the government gets desperate and sneaky, which it might, I suppose, then the government might take action against you in some way to stop you from doing that.
Right. And it's very sad that we live in a time when the trust in government is that low. And it is, as far as I gather, at least for certain branches of the government, at an all-time low since they've ever started keeping track of this kind of data, and which is sort of a depressing fact. That what are we doing wrong? We're electing these people who we think are incompetent or worse. Right?
And we're giving them the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, exactly.
They could actually gin up stuff like this.
Yeah.
The president is a more powerful person now than really ever. And the president can do all kinds of black arts things that the rest of the government doesn't even know about, and that we don't know about.
Right. Yeah.
And he could do, all the dark things we're talking about now.
Right. The classic Wag the Dog movie, right?
Yeah. So I'm remembering things. Number one is the woman who went to Flint, Michigan, is Nancy Pelosi.
Yes. Right.
And number two is the Minority Report, was the movie with Tom Cruise.
Okay.
And it's really remarkable how the movies. Those guys must sit around like you and me and try to, do science fiction, figure out what's going to happen in the future, and then they make a movie. That's probably what happened in the case of Minority Report. They had a discussion just like this. And said, let's make a movie. We can't go on like this.
Have to make a movie, you know?
Okay, so why don't you tell the people what we learned today?
Summarize this conversation. Well, let's see. Genetically modified technology is not necessarily always a bad thing. It can save lives. We've covered that, right? We talked about how water is going to be an increasingly valuable resource.
Science,
right?
Science for kids.
Right, we briefly touched on informal science learning and some of the exciting frontiers that I just was lucky enough to go off and see. And then we ended up on this sort of paranoid streak about our government and their potential to intrude on our lives.
Using science.
Well, of
or
course.
misusing it.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
I got to, you know, to boil all that down, is we are in a world of high tech that is moving faster now than we ever imagined before. We are in a world where the relationship between the citizens and the government is a little more strained,
Right.
even in a democracy like this.
Therefore, ethics education is really like a very critical issue, right? Do we teach people, or shouldn't we be teaching people from an early age how to behave ethically, to be sure that people understand, like, there are things you do and things you don't do.
Yeah.
But of course, who gets to determine that curriculum? You know?
It's the curriculum, it's the
Right.
schools in the end, you have to teach them that.
Right.
But it's also the family.
Right.
And one more thing, if we had to close on something, you know, I regretted when they terminated the draft.
Uh-huh.
You know, and if I go ask the same people that I asked before about whether they like the government, they'll all say, no, wrong, the draft was bad. You know, we should not have a draft, never bring it back. But the good thing about the draft is it gave kids an opportunity to connect with and understand the government, to do national service. We don't have that now, and very few people are actually connected with the government.
Right. No, I tend to agree. I mean, I think some sort of a national service program would probably be a very good thing, just as I think public schools are a very good thing in the way they get different groups of kids connected across sort of class, ethnicity lines, neighborhood lines. That really helps us realize that we're all sort of on the same team, you know,
Yeah.
which we need a little more of, I think.
Okay, Zuri, we've gone the distance. We've covered it all. We've saved the world yet again.
All right.
Through technology and science. Ethan Allen and me. He's the host of Likeable Science, Indeed Likeable. And today he's playing the role of Gunga Din and a bioman and ethics man.
There we go.
Thank you so much, Ethan.
Thank you, Jay. Always a pleasure talking to you.